Rainey.
Here.
Alderman Burris.
Here.
Alderman Fisk.
Here.
Alderman John Batiste. Here. Alderman Nguyen.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Alderman Holmes.
Here.
Alderman Tindem. Here. Alderman Grover.
I'm here, thank you.
None, Madam Mayor.
We have a quorum. I have no public announcements. City Manager, do you have announcements?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Dave Stonebeck, our Superintendent of Water and Sewer, is here this evening to give the council and community a briefing about a project that the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District is planning with some new sewer mains in the Orrington Avenue vicinity. Mr. Stonebeck, good evening.
Good evening. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District has several sewer mains throughout the city of Evanston. They were installed in the early 1900s, and the district is going about rehabilitating them. They have successfully completed 2 or 3 projects prior to this one. On this particular job is more right in the downtown heart of Evanston. It includes the rehabilitation of approximately 3,800 feet of 72-inch and 90-inch diameter sewers. This map illustrates the larger diameter sewers in Evanston, and the ones that are in red are owned by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. There are some that go up along Sheridan Road. There's one that's on Custer and Elmwood. There's a large 10-foot diameter sewer on Lake Street, and those are the sewers that have been previously rehabilitated. What this project includes is work on Lake Street from Sheridan Road to the pump station at Elmwood, and on Orrington Avenue and Sherman Avenue from Emerson Street to Lake Street. The type of rehabilitation that will be done is called the cured-in-place pipeline. It's a soft felt tube that's saturated with resins, and then it's inserted into the pipeline, and then the water that's used to insert the pipeline is heated, and it sets off the catalyst, the resins, and when the pipe is done, it's a nice, hard, solid pipe inside the existing pipe, so there's very little excavation required to do this. It's far less disruptive than replacing the sewer pipe by open cut excavation. Again, this is a location map showing the work that's to be completed. It's on Lake Street from Elmwood Avenue to Sheridan Road, and on Orrington Sherman from Emerson down to Lake Street. The first activity that will actually take place on this project is on Greenwood, which is shown at the bottom of the map. The existing sewers, the flow that goes through the existing sewer has to be diverted to a different sewer in order to make this process work. So they'll be installing a 12-inch plastic pipe basically along the south curb line of Greenwood Street from Sheridan Road to Hinman and discharging it into the city's relief sewer system. And that's setting up bypass pumping. It will be buried just below the asphalt level at street crossings and at driveways. The next work site and they're doing that in preparation of doing the first work area, which is on Lake Street from Elmwood Avenue to Sheridan Road. The work site itself is on Lake Street between, just east of Hinman, between Hinman and Judson. The work is tentatively scheduled to begin February 22nd today. It's actually been pushed back 1 week, if not 2. And the work hopefully in this area will be completed by April 30th. It's all weather dependent as well. When they actually start the lining process, they'll need 5 days to be able to complete the first section of work, and that's from Hinman to Elmwood. So they have to wait for a window when there's no rain forecasted for 5 days to even begin the process. Once they start, they put the liner into the sewer pipe, and they have to work around the clock for those 5 days. There's big tanker trucks that come out that have the resin, and they have to put that into the felt tube liner. Then it takes about 2 days to get the liner into place. It takes another 2 days to heat the water up that's inside the sewer pipe to set off the catalyst, and then they have to slowly cure it. So that's the 5-day process on that. They'll work out of the same manhole and go from Hinman east to Sheridan Road, and that's 1,450 feet, and that's a 6-day process till they can repeat the same scenario. So there's an existing manhole on Lake Street just east of Hinman Avenue that they're going to use. Instead of excavating large shafts to perform this work, they'll excavate about 6 foot deep over an existing manhole and remove the cone section to get to the 48-inch diameter barrel section of the manhole. They'll put the liner down through that manhole, inflate it using water and water pressure to make it roll out through the sewer pipe, push it up against the hose pipe, and then circulate the water through boiler trucks to heat the water up, and that sets off the catalyst and makes the hard pipe inside the existing pipe. And again, that's the 5 to 6 day process. So when they set up on Lake Street, just east of Hinman Avenue, that block of Lake Street will actually be closed to all through traffic. The detour is relatively simple here. It's north on Hinman to Judson, and then, north on Hinman to Grove, and then east-west on Grove and back to the same intersection. There are 5 residents along that block, and the one closest to the work site does have a driveway, but we're going to leave access to that driveway available. And tomorrow morning, we're walking out and meeting all those homeowners and letting them know that we're coming. And we've already had discussions with the church. So this area will be blocked off ideally only for 2 weeks, but and they won't excavate over the manhole until they know they have the original 5-day window. They'll excavate the day before, put the liner in, and then they'll get that work done. If the weather forecast is good for the next 6 days, they'll work right at it and get the next 6 days done and complete, and they'll be out of this area completely. The next area that they plan to work on more or less concurrently is actually on Davis Street between Orrington Avenue and Hinman Avenue. This is relatively small diameter pipe. It's 18-inch and 24-inch. This is similar to what the city does all the time. This work will be, the rehabilitation of these smaller diameter sewers will be completed in a 12-hour window. They'll start at 10 o'clock at night and be out by 10 o'clock the following morning. When they do line the sewers, you can't discharge any waste into the sewers, and that's why we scheduled this work to take place at night so that the restaurants won't be impacted by the work that we're doing. Area 3 is the main area working on, this isn't it. This is on Lake Street from Elmwood Avenue to Sherman Avenue. This is a relatively short section of 450 feet of 90-inch pipe. It will take approximately 4 days to complete. Again, it's a window that they're trying to work in between March 22nd and April 19th and have the 4 days of no rain forecasted. When they set up at this location, we will close westbound traffic on Lake Street and only allow eastbound traffic. The work site will be on the north half of the block, and it's right in front of the Lake Street pumping station that's owned by the MWRD. Again, this one will go about for 4 days. Area 4 is the major impact area that's on Orrington, and they'll be working from the intersection of Orrington and Davis Street, and all the streets in this intersection are already one-way traffic. Orrington's one-way northbound, Davis Street is one-way westbound, and Sherman is one-way southbound. You can see that they're going to take up a fairly large work area, both on Davis Street and on Orrington Avenue. We will allow 1 lane of traffic northbound, and we will allow 1 lane of traffic westbound on Davis Street. They're going to use this manhole, and they'll go from this manhole at the intersection down north to Clark Street, and that will take approximately 7 days to complete. And they'll go from this manhole south to Lake Street, and then that will take approximately 6 days to complete. This is the staging area that they do it. The liner actually comes in on a big tractor trailer. They have to set up conveyors. They have to pull the liner into the sewer. So that's the area that they need. On the day that they're actually injecting the resin into the liner, they need a little bit more area actually on Sherman Avenue, because the resin trucks with big tractor trailer trucks will set up on this area over here and put the resin into the felt tube before it goes down into the sewer. So Sherman Avenue will be impacted on this setup as well. Approximately 2 days each time they do the work. So a total of 4 days Sherman Avenue will be involved, but a total of 11 to 12 days for the liner installation complete at this intersection. Area 5 is at the very north end of the project on Orrington from Emerson to Clark, which is basically through Northwestern's campus. Orrington doesn't go through there. At the request of Northwestern University, this work will be done between July 5th and September 6th, when their campus population is at its lowest point, and the work will be completed at that time period. There's other impacts, as I indicate. There will be bypass pumping that's necessary to take the sewage that normally flows through the sewers and put it into the city's relief sewer. There will be sewer cleaning activities that are performed out there. You'll see sewer cleaning trucks out there cleaning the sewer, making it ready before the job actually gets going. The last concern that people have is the resin itself. It's called styrene. It's used commonly in the fiberglass industry. It is a very strong odor, chemical odor. Generally, we only sense it when they're heating up the water. When they're inserting it into the liner, it's like a closed system. You don't smell it then. But as they heat up the water and the catalyst to set off the resin, that's when you actually start getting the smell. So it should be about a 12-hour window when you can potentially smell the styrene. It's a very noticeable smell. It's not harmful at the levels that you can detect it, but there is some concern by some of our residents out there that this will be a problem. So just want to bring that out to your attention.
Alderman Rainey?
This has happened in other parts of town. Has this work ever been done in other parts of town?
Yes, Evanston's been using the same process since 1983.
I remember.
And the MWRD has completed Custer Street and Elmwood in your ward.
One question I wanted to ask you, have there been any reports of illness or any symptoms whatsoever from the use of this chemical?
No, none that we're aware of. The city lined a 72-inch sewer on Emerson Street several years ago, and we had complaints from the residents at Sherman Gardens, I believe, and they called the US EPA out, and we did air monitoring. We have a resident now that's already called the US EPA and is concerned about the project. That resident lives diagonally across from the pumping station. So unfortunately, she's been involved with 3 of these projects already being right outside her door, basically. But there has not been any knowledge to me of anybody getting ill or sick from the resin.
Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Stonebeck. I just wanted to make sure that you've coordinated your traffic with the demolition and construction that's going on at Mather with their transportation plan?
Yes, we have. The detour routes were all set up through the engineering division, and we specifically made sure that they did not interfere with that same traffic route. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, just one additional item. Jonathan Perman, the Executive Director of the Evanston Chamber of Commerce, is not able to be with us this evening, but asked me to give a plug for this Friday afternoon at noon at the Hotel Orrington will be the Mayor's annual State of the City address, as well as the Mayor's Arts Awards. So for those who have not purchased their tickets, they can contact the Chamber of Commerce, and they will be able to purchase tickets to that fine event. And that concludes my...
Thank you, City Manager. City Clerk, do you have communications?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have one set of communications from the Cook County Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. They'll be conducting 3 sets of seminars entitled 2010 Cook County Weather Spotter Seminar Schedules. The one that we'd be interested in would be the one on April 14th. It'll be here at the Lorraine H. Morton Civic Center, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, April 14th. Invite everyone who would like to learn more about weather spotting to come in for that seminar. That concludes my announcements, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Next, City Manager, we have a special order of business, the Capital Improvement Plan Review.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you know, the council has spent a good deal of time dealing with the operating budget for 2010-2011. As part of your goals for the year, you also asked that we spend particular attention on the capital improvement program budget a process that it's my understanding that the council has not always had the opportunity to go through and find detail. So this evening, what we would like to do is walk through our proposed capital budget for the coming year. There are multiple component parts, which Mr. Lyons will go through. But as he's passing out some additional information, let me just raise a red flag to you. And that red flag is the city's ability to finance general capital projects. That generally occurs through the issuance of debt, and that debt is supported through a line on the property tax levy to pay that debt. As Mr. Lyons will detail to you, the city of Evanston has run up quite a bit of general fund debt to support the capital projects budget over the last several years. What we're proposing tonight, as well as an overview of our current status of general obligation debt with the capital projects, is hopefully a game plan that will continue to meet the needs of the city of Evanston and its capital projects, but also to be as responsible as we can from a debt financing perspective. Certainly this presentation this evening is not the be-all and end-all on this, but we hope that the council can come to an agreement on what makes the most sense for a somewhat modest capital improvement, general capital improvement budget for 10-11, and then have additional discussions over the course of the next 12 months to really fine-tune a larger capital improvement program as well as funding strategies for those capital improvements. So with that introduction, Mr. Lyons, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Some of this presentation, you've seen parts of it. We did have a brief discussion in January on the capital budget. We also talked about it last fall, but this is a slightly different look at it today, where we have broken things out just for next year because we are focusing on finishing off our budget process. So I will go through this not as fast as I did the last time with that capital, and of course take questions as we go through. So again, this was a repeat, but for folks who have not seen, our goal is to provide a comprehensive capital plan that makes good use of resources to maintain our infrastructure. Our 5-year plan identifies these infrastructure needs. The first year is approved officially by resolution and is included in the budget. The remaining 4 years are for policy direction and planning process when we need to be looking years out and when we have multiple year projects. Again, our primary funding sources for our capital are GO and other debt, motor fuel tax funds, water and sewer revenues, tax increment from our tax increment financing districts, that's property taxes, reserves, and then we have interfund transfers, so our fleet fund pays for its own capital, state and federal grants, and private sources. So what's going on with our resources and the economy? Our city debt is at a high level, but not for the reasons you might think. Our debt for physical assets, our capital debt, has been holding its own fairly well. As you all may recall, we had a lot of capital debt in building the downtown, and then we had a lot of capital debt in putting in the major sewer infrastructure that Dave Stonebeck referred to. We had a lot of our own capital debt associated with that. So our debt has maintained its high level, partially out of substitution. Pension debt has come up dramatically. I looked back to 2004, the last year that it's included in our audit, and we've gone from about $85 million to $158 million in pension debt. So that's a large increase. So one of the things we're seeing in the economy currently is we have a greater availability of grants because of all the capital programs, but they do require matches in most cases, which drives up our own debt issuance to match what we're getting in grants. We have been a little concerned. We've had many meetings and meet always with both state and federal personnel to make sure about the timing, the receipt, the method of receiving grants so that we're clear in our own budget and resource planning of when we will get money. Another part of the economy that's impacting us is totally local, and it's almost, you'd call it weather. It's not the economy. Our water and sewer revenues are down based on lower pumpage, and they are impacting our ability to continue to do infrastructure improvements based on previous multi-year assumptions. So sewer is in a very tight fix as far as being able to fund the IEPA debt all the way up through 2014. This also impacts us as far as our goal to keep property taxes more or less frozen when our next 4 or 5 years of debt have a gradually increasing debt service payment, even if we issue no new debt, and we'll get into that. So how much debt do we have? Our GO debt per the 2008-2009 Certified Annual Financial Report, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is $174 million. Government activities refers to everything except water and sewer and parking. So we have 118 in everything but water, sewer, and parking, and then approximately 56 million in those areas. The non-general obligation debt is our Illinois EPA loan. So we have a remaining balance of 104 million, and that was nearly double it at one point. So we've been much higher. We've been paying the debt down, and we will start to see our payments of principal and interest start to come down in the year 2014. Our pension and personnel-related debt, again, police and fire, that is a variable debt. It can go up and down, but it's close to 160 million. Our compensated absences, this is our debt associated with time off banks that are greater than 1 year duration. So not what anyone has or what they've earned in the current year. It's the debt that's owed from people who have accrued time over many years. Some of them are at maxes, but we do track that, and we have $5.7 million. On a $50 million payroll, that's not a bad number. It's just something we should be aware of.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, is that a debt with reserves to cover it? It certainly isn't money that we would, or it isn't a fund that we would bond for.
No, it's not. And we actually have approximately 2.5 million in reserves, and you would find that also in the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report as a reserve for compensated absences payable. So in some time in the past, we did set up a reserve. It's not quite sufficient, but that's a lot better than many communities have.
Right.
So-
But you're only telling us this so we know the total amount of debt. It has nothing
Correct.
to do with the capital plan.
That is correct.
Alderman Burris? I'm sorry, Marty.
I have a question about what are the maximum for the accrual of vacation time?
They
sick
vary,
time?
sorry.
Go ahead.
They vary by union, and they also vary. We have several individuals that were grandfathered in the last 3 to 4 years. We put in limits, and we'd be happy to provide I think our limits will fit on a sheet, and we can follow up with what our limits are for. It's vacation, sick, holiday, and comp time.
Okay, I know that this is not your area, but at some point it would be good to have that memo on what change has happened, how much liability do we keep on the books, and are we at a use it and lose it phase now with the maximum? So if you, let's say 24 accrual days of vacation, do you have to use it by the end of the year, or you start to lose it? That time. It'd be good to have a memo on that. Thank you.
And then finally, OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits that we were required to start tracking approximately 2 years ago. So we're at 7.6 million. And again, there are many communities that have 10 times this debt that are our size. We have a very low debt amount for our OPEB liability because retirees pay 100% of their health care costs. So the total is 450 million when you add all of those up on a assessed value for the whole community of just under $2.8 billion. So this is, we looked at how do we compare with other communities. So these are communities of a size with the city, and you can see that we are on the high end. We're not quite as high as Schaumburg. Schaumburg, that's a lot of that debt is for a large development they did, conference center. So a lot of that, I believe, is abated. So it's not necessarily tax or property tax related debt. And I'd be happy to answer questions about these tables. I've got two of them. And then you have what is our debt when we look at our total bonds, our non-GO bonds, that's where we add in the IEPA debt and compare it to our equalized assessed valuation. And that's where we head up towards the top of the chart, where we're at 10% of our total debt. Remember that $100 million of that is funded, we hope, by water and sewer fees. But the $174 million, that is our GO debt on the far left column. And when you look at just the general obligation debt, we drop down to 6.28% of our assessed valuation. So what does this mean to the capital fund and to our capital projects? The first column on the left after the levy years that's shaded is our existing unabated tax levy. So that is the amount of payments we make every year on our outstanding debt currently. And as you can see, we go from 10.1 million up to 10.6 million in 2012. That's if we issue no new debt for any general obligation purposes. So even though we will be paying off some debt, our debt service schedules are set at that level. And we also have an abatement schedule. So this includes our planned abatements during that time frame. So what this table then shows is if we're looking at a long-term capital funding scenario, if we were issuing $7.5 million in new debt each year, what would happen to our overall levy as we went through the cycle of approximately 10 years? And it's not really bad in that our assessed value will probably increase, although we think we'll be a flat spot here. We can go back up to 2%, 3%, 4% increases each year. For the period I looked at, if I looked back 10 years, our assessed value 10 years ago was $1.3, $1.4 million. So we doubled in that 10 years. And a lot of that had to do with the downtown development and other development activities. But a lot of it also had to do with increases in the value of all properties. So there's a high likelihood that our property values will go up.
Alderman Rainey?
Just to clarify, when you indicate that we have indebtedness for downtown development, what you're talking about are public garages and not building, commercial buildings or infrastructure.
And it's definitely the public garages, and that is, for the most part, abated debt. So nearly all of our debt in the tax levy portion is for roads and sidewalks and parks. Water is abated. So water and sewer won't show up there either. So our current status. We budgeted $7.8 million in debt proceeds for the year, but we aren't going to issue any. And we're going to end the year with $7 million approximately in the capital improvements fund. So it was a wise decision not to proceed with any debt and to manage our projects as best we can with current reserves. Just on that amount, since we didn't issue debt now and bank it for the projects we'd identified, we'd saved $625,000 in interest payments. Again, this is just a repeat of the next bullet point of those charts that we had before. But the last bullet point is that what we're going to show in the next several slides is options that the zero option's not up there, but it is an option anywhere from a 0% debt issuance up to 11.6 million. And that number started out closer to 20 million last fall. The capital improvements team has continued to look at projects and move projects out and prioritize them. So we'll go through that right now. The capital improvements revenues by source, I think it's important to note that you see this is our do everything priorities 1, 2, and 3 revenue table. So $11.6 million in debt is what's needed to do all of our projects that we've identified for 2010-11. Some projects have been moved out, but these are the ones that are remaining, and then we prioritize them. So you can see that it's a little bit under 40% of our revenue is from general obligation debt. If anyone has any questions, our grants are a variety of different grants. The $5 million includes a $1.1 million for the Lakefront Master Plan, $750,000 for the stimulus funding for Parks and Recs. So there's a lot of We do a very good job on grants, and then you can also see the amount of revenues that come in from other funds, such as the water department paying for all of its debt, all of its capital.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes, Marty, could you share with us so that we can understand this more simply in terms of our indebtedness, what the amount of levy is per $1 million of capital improvements, bond? Is it 100,000?
No, we've been using the number approximately 80,000.
80,000?
Yes. So I think it's slightly under, but 80 is a good conservative number. And in the next few years, if we end up with a blip in the economy going upwards, then we could easily see our long-term interest rates go up as well. So we've been able to borrow at about 4 to 4.5%. 80,000 is closer to 5% as a flat interest rate across 20 years.
So when we spend $1 million, when we bond for $1 million, we pay 80
Correct.
on the easy payment plan.
That's correct.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste?
Yeah, Marty, maybe I'm not in that category yet. You talked about for the 2011 projects, this is the revenue. I'm not sure I understand the distinction that you make between this and, for example, a Robert Crown or other such projects that we may have contemplated. So can you make the distinction?
Certainly. These are all of our projects where we have identified the grants and we have identified the revenues and we have a handle on the project scope. So Robert Crown, we have in this capital plan at $150,000 for the study to look at how much will Robert Crown cost if we do design build or whatever option presents itself. But this 2010-11 does not contemplate a shovel in the ground for Robert Crown or whether it's 10 million, 20 million, whatever the size of the final structure would be, that would be in future years for the capital improvements plan. And we would, when we brought this to you about 3 weeks ago, we did show you the 5 years where we had the much higher debt and much higher capital amount that included Robert Crown, $10 million on this facility, and that's, as we said at the beginning, the 5-year part is for policy and planning purposes. We're not saying that through the adoption of the budget, you're authorizing staff to proceed and bring things back. That's just the plan and outlining what our responsibilities are in the next 5 years. I hope I answered the question, but Robert Crown's not in here other than planning, and neither are any of the very, very large projects. We have our routine maintenance for streets, for water mains, things of that nature, but everything else is trimmed back fairly significantly.
Why is Robert Crown not in here and projected with some kind of timetable for consideration?
Alderman Jean-Baptiste, let me take a stab at that. We'll be back at your next meeting on March the 8th with a request for qualifications for council approval. So that project's moving forward. As Mr. Lyons indicated, there's $150,000. We're hoping to do all of the work on this project ourselves as far as the procurement, but we wanted to leave some money for architects, engineers if we would need that. So we'll be back at your next meeting with the draft request for qualifications.
Thank you. And any other questions, we can certainly revisit the revenues as we go through this. What we have now is slide by slide of what you received in your memo on Friday, the projects listed by funding source, so you get an idea of the magnitude and, of each of the revenues and the projects being supported by them. We have $3.5 million coming from capital fund reserves, and one of the questions that I had right away was, well, why is the yellow line in there out of reserves? And that was, we put it in there. We are getting a grant. You'll see that in the next couple of slides for $220,000, or we hope to be getting a grant for the $220,000. We will not move forward with the $55,000 in expenses should we not get the yellow line grant. So another question that I received earlier was, for these expenditures, how did you get to the #1 ranking? And we used 4 qualifications, and it wasn't scientific, each one's worth 25%. It was a look and feel to get to this. So in the case of CTA Yellow, well, we had a good-sized grant that was going to fund all the research at the next stage, so putting in our $55,000 initially seemed like a good investment where we were beyond the 50-50 mark for that project. Street resurfacing, on the other hand, we have to keep up with our streets. It's an ongoing maintenance program, and if we don't, we will fall behind and we will end up at $4 million or $5 million a year. So that's one that's seen as a priority one. Be happy to take questions about projects as I go through or at the end.
Alderman Rainey?
Could you remind us about bridges? Do we own the bridges? Or
I do not, as Mr. Snyder here, I do not believe we own the bridge. We, in many cases, maintain the pavement, et cetera, but I will defer on ownership on a case-by-case basis. If it's a bridge over, especially, for instance, if it's Dempster, and that's still the portion of the state route, we wouldn't own it.
But I believe when they did the Asbury Bridge that goes over the yellow line, didn't the state pay for that?
Again, that's definitely a possibility, and of course.
And then, Dave, do you know?
And any of the mass transit bridges, no, we don't own those. But I can get back to you with which bridges as a part of, especially those that are impacted here, the bridge rehab program.
And that's why I'm wondering why we have $400,000 for somebody else's bridges.
Well, I would venture, and I'll confirm that, yes, we in fact own this bridge. We also, we're working on one project where we're rehabbing the bridge and the water main that runs underneath the bridge.
So we would take that part. We own Bridge Street in Isabella?
Thank you, Suzette. The next is what we would be told. The next two slides are those projects that would be funded by new general obligation debt. Or if we were able to raise funds if the state decided to do zero-interest loans from IEPA for street surfaces, we would certainly take those. So far, it's only been sewer and now a little bit more in water. But as you can see, we have a lot of facilities. That's been a high priority in this capital improvements plan. We need to have some work done on our facilities. So some of those are, when the facility is a park, though, it is referenced as Parks Forestry or Parks Recreation. So it's not under facilities management. And for a total, in what we're talking about in this, for your consideration, this plan, we're looking at $7.8 million, and then I draw your attention back to how much does that cost? Well, we looked at the $7.5 million in debt would be approximately $575,000 in annual principal and interest payments. That's what would happen with the levy, that would be the additional amount.
How much more is that than this year?
Presently, we're at $10.1 million for our unabated tax levy to pay for debt. And we have about $12 million in abated bond payments. So we do try to pay for as much as we can through other sources. So we go on now to both, this next project is, I think I just want to make sure I didn't go past it.
Alderman Burris, did you have a question?
About this next slide.
So the next slide, you see we have, I apologize, that should not say that at the top. That's supposed to say other funds, not water and sewer funded projects. And as you will note, the first 6 items are just individual projects from a variety of areas. So the IT infrastructure, that is an IT project, and that covers our servers, our networks, and we have a couple of specific projects included in the $400,000. That's been reduced from approximately $1.1 million in years past, where we had $400,000 just for strategic plans in general, and then specific projects. So that number has come down substantially from previous years in the CIP. The 1817 Church Street is a property that we are looking to repair and then rehab. That's why it's in the Economic Development Fund and not in the capital improvements.
That's what I had the question about.
Me too.
Go ahead. Thanks. I think probably many of the people on the Community Development Committee that were on it previously and on the committee now want a lot more information about the renovation of this building. This has been a problem property for a while. We've dumped a lot, at least 200,000, if not more. And Alderman Jean-Baptiste, I'm kind of looking at you here for confirmation. Why would we put another 75,000 in this building that needs to be torn down probably, but we don't know what's going to happen to it? I'm sorry, probably should say that. But there's a lot of problems there. I can't imagine that's throwing $75,000 away. So how did that get on the #1 ranking?
Because it did get on the #1 because it was for needed repairs to make it sellable. And that was just a recommendation from the capital improvements team to, if we were going to sell it as is, if it's just going to be torn down, obviously the $75,000 would go away. So that's again, that's a priority, and we would certainly at this juncture or in the future be able to change the rankings for these projects.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes. I think it's important for those people who are not on the committee to know is that we currently have, not sure how to explain it, a request for proposals out into the #1, the not-for-profit community, and #2, in the general community, to come back to us with concepts for redevelopment of that property. It would be my thinking that were we to sell this to a for-profit or something that HUD would not approve of, because don't forget, we've been maintaining this with HUD dollars, that we would then have to go to the Economic Development Fund for money. But I don't understand why CD funds really aren't listed here as the source to do this roof.
When you say CD,
Community Development Block Grant. And I think the problem is, that we're, the problem with selling it to somebody that would qualify for CD funds. We tried that once, if you remember, and it failed miserably. So it's out for the best idea right now. And I'm not sure what the condition of the roof is. Our staff person has not come to the committee and said that this was an urgent need. Have they? No. I mean, I didn't hear that from our committee. But the head of facilities is here, and he's going to tell us. You.
That's actually not why Mr. Cook was getting up, but...
Oh, really? Don't you know
Going
about
to turn the
that?
lights off?
Alderman Raby, members of the council, this $75,000 primarily is to make the building, the exterior safe. The facade is starting to crumble and fall onto the sidewalk. We had reports from our building department, and the roof is failing. So this is sort of just to fix it until we get through the process that you described.
That's way too much money just to fix it. I'm
Well,
sorry.
That's
I
what the
think, what
estimate
is the
is.
cost to rent a bulldozer? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste?
First of all, I think that the message that's going out through our discussion is that we've abandoned our commitment to use that building as a museum, cultural center, et cetera, et cetera. That's the last time we spoke on the issue. That's our commitment. We've not changed it. So that's one thing. Secondly, I would strongly agree with my colleagues at the end of the day is that before we could make any decision as to what repairs, that needs to come back to the CDBG committee. And, as it's stated here, for roof work, 75,000 roof and chimney, that would be a giveaway, because it just doesn't cost that much, I don't think. So, number one, we have a commitment. Number two, we're pursuing that through the request for proposal. Number three, maintaining the building and making sure that it's not falling apart is a good thing, but you need to come back through the CDBG process.
But the point is, we're being told that this money is in here to protect passerbys and to protect the building. We have not had any information that
Right.
stuff is falling off that building or that the roof is failing.
Oh, hold
Well,
on.
that's-
It's Alderman Holmes's turn.
I'm sorry.
That's what I'm saying. It's just for not really.
I'm sorry, Alderman Jean-Baptiste, are you done?
No, I'm just saying that,
Okay.
we ought to just consider the funds that are there as, a measure to, in case we need that extensive repair. I don't think we're going to need that much repair because you're right, we've not heard any complaints. But certainly, we would not approve the spending of $75,000 for roof and chimney work.
City manager?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, something we probably should have said at the beginning, and let me have an opportunity to say it now. There has been, my understanding, a past practice that if the project has been in the budget, that means the council's approved it and you never have to see it ever again. That is wrong, in my opinion. This is a budget of allocating resources. Any project that would be included in any final capital budget would have to come to you for approval. We have already made changes so that you're seeing requests for proposals, you're seeing bid documents. So again, certainly there could be a policy discussion on the $75,000 at another point if the council so chose, but just because it's on this budget and you ultimately approve this budget does not mean that that gives us a blank check to do these projects. That's a change from my understanding of the past practice.
Alderman Holmes?
Well, first off, I do want to say that things have been falling off the roof, and the sidewalk was actually closed down for quite a while last year. But besides that, I don't know how, I know the report was made to staff, so I don't know. It didn't come to CD. You're absolutely right, because I said on there, but it did happen. But what bothers me about this, though, is that we need to wait and see if we're going to get any takers for the RFP on this, because that building is not in great shape. And I don't know if not-for-profits are going to really, who will have the money to really renovate it. And, we've had suggestions that it might cost up to almost $1 million to really get that building in working condition, because it would have to be ADA in order to utilize the whole building. It's very small. It may look large, but it's very small, and you need to be able to use the second and the third levels. And there'd have to be an elevator or something there. So I have never abandoned the idea of it being a museum or a cultural center, but I do think it needs to come down, and they start from the ground up to do that. And it's just, to me, this would be just putting good money after bad.
Alderman Burris? No. Alderman Fisk?
Madam Mayor, I just, whenever you have a building, in order to maintain the building, you start with the roof. And that's what keeps a building in good condition. I just want to remind everyone that this is a local landmark that we're talking about and worthy of preservation. I know a little bit about the history of the building that I don't need to repeat here, but if we're going to look at any building to put money into, this is a good place to start. And the roof, obviously, is a place to start there.
But Madam Mayor, couldn't we not save the facade of the building? And we understand that it's a landmark, but and still, if it came down, you could still be able to keep the facade of it, and it still maintain that. Alderman Fish.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll respond. I think we probably want to ask the Preservation Commission. They're a really great resource in terms of finding a lower cost alternatives to doing work. They were very helpful on the Civic Center roof, for example, rather than replacing with real slate, replacing with a composite material. So I think we should ask the Preservation Commission.
Alderman Burris?
Yeah, before people get that this great historic building. There's several of us, I think 4 of us, that have been actually through the building, and I recommend going and having a tour before we allocate any money going into this structure. The outside, the facade is beautiful. I agree 100%, and if we could save the facade and knock down behind it and put up a building, but this building is really terrible. It's in a very, very bad shape, and there's no way that it could be possibly ADA compliant. There was a partial renovation that was done, but it would need to be, everything in the whole building would need to be gutted. So, like I said, I recommend, if you really are interested in this building, to actually do your homework and go and have a tour of it. It's very enlightening.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, we've spent $200,000 on this building in the last few years, and it is my recommendation that if you want to leave it in here so that you've got an extra 70-some thousand, leave it in there, but this matter needs to go to the Community Development Block Grant Committee at its next meeting, which is this coming month, and it needs to be fully discussed. And all of the information needs to be provided to the committee that has resulted in it being on this list. And what are the issues that are requiring the $75,000? At the same time, we should get a report. We've extended the time for proposals. And at that time, I think the committee will make a recommendation, and hopefully whoever on our staff has made a decision that this is going to cost $75,000 needs to show up at our meeting and give us a full rundown of what the problems are and why it's going to cost what it's going to cost. We just need to have this. This is our building. We need to deal with it.
Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The Preservation Committee is invited to the meeting, but we're not going to the Preservation Committee, okay?
That's fine. And there are certainly local architects who deal with buildings in Evanston, have a very strong commitment not only to these buildings, but also know what it costs to rehab them, and I would like to invite them as well.
Moving right along.
Go ahead, Marty.
For the remainder of this slide, you can see that there's also, probably the one that is the largest is, we do have our rolling stock of capital, 1.7 million in for fleet, and that's all funded by other funds. So this is not adding into any debt that were issued. It's operating money that is being transferred away out of operating departments to cover the replacement of vehicles. Then when you drop down to the next grouping, you see we have over $1.6 million that's been aggregated by the E911 board over a few years, and they're now ready to spend on some fairly substantial upgrades in both technology and facilities for the police 911 center and the software systems that help it run smoothly. The next, you see we have grant funds, and these are specific grants in the first area, and then CDBG in the second. I know that we're missing maybe one small one. There we have a $24,000 grant that was from CDB for SNAP lighting, I think. I apologize, that's not in here right now, but we were aware of that. But you can see the Lakefront Master Plan and the Lake Street local area paving program. Those are the large grants. And in some cases, some of these, like Lake Street is substantially done, and we're waiting for funding that will come back our way. But those grants, we still need to show in the plan. I referenced the CDBG already, so then we go to motor fuel tax. This year, motor fuel tax is going to pay for half of our roadway maintenance program. We had to trim down the roadway maintenance program to get some other projects done, but when you look at this, we have 1.7 plus the 1.4 in a previous slide, so we still have over $3 million in resurfacing for the city.
Alderman Rainey, did you have a question?
Yes. What percentage does motor fuel tax usually pay?
We raised it from 1.2 million to 1.7 million because we knew that it would be a lean year, and we were at approximately just under $1 million in reserves in the motor fuel tax fund, so that would take the reserves down to about $400,000, enough to start a year. Motor fuel tax comes in monthly, so we would have enough to start our construction year and stay ahead of contractor payments. But there is a bit of a drawdown in reserves there on the motor fuel tax.
I asked what percentage of motor fuel tax usually covers our roadway improvements. You said a greater percentage this year than in the past.
Right now, I would say that MFT is covering over 50% of the regular resurfacing program,
What does it usually cover?
about 30 to 40.
40, really? And the balance is from GO bonds?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Now, we do, whenever we can, of course, we supplement with any of, for instance, the Lake Street grant or any of those grants. We don't always just add and borrow $3 million no matter what. We have, brought our borrowing down in the past when we've gotten large grants. Then you have the...
Could I ask one more question? Sure. Could you explain to all of us how motor fuel tax monies come back to the city?
Certainly. The motor fuel tax is a state-collected gas tax that is redistributed back to the city on a per capita basis. And Steve Drasner might know off the top of his head, but I don't. The MFT, I think it's about $15 or $16 per capita per year. It might be a little bit higher.
Well, I'm sorry to say I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe we get, I think it's between 15 to 20% of the total tax.
So, but I could get that per capita amount. We do have it.
So it's not per capita?
It is. So we get, for instance, we get $15 per head. So we have 75,000 heads, and we get, Steve, you have a budget there, that the green budget, you could pull up what our, it's on the other side of Grant, what our MFT revenue is for 10-11.
Does it matter, while he's looking, does it matter how much gas is bought in Evanston?
Yes, it does.
It does.
No, actually, no, I apologize. No, it really doesn't. It's all population-based for the state portion. We do also have our own portion, but that goes into the general fund.
We would still encourage people to buy their gas in Evanston.
Yes, we would always
What did you
encourage-
say?
However, we still encourage people to buy their gas in
Oh,
Evanston.
absolutely. Yeah. Especially the new Shell on Oakton. Which is going to, by the way, be offering free car washes over the next few weeks.
One other item that I think will increase, it's taken a little bit of a downturn. We're taking a pause in our TIF expenditures for capital. We still have a lot of expenditures in the Washington National TIF for debt on our previous major capital projects, but West Evanston TIF is just starting to crank up as far as projects, and that will continue. And also I'm going to probably draw a blank between Howard Hartree or Howard Ridge. That is also the smaller. We still have one parcel in one of those TIFs that we'd like to see developed that may take a little bit of capital as well. So now we have the right water and sewer on the top of the slide. You notice that the sewer fund, we have just maintenance this year for sewer projects. And again, given the incredible amount of investment done over the past 2 decades, you can take a pause, but we can't do it forever. But this is literally just for maintenance. This will take the sewer fund down to a 0 fund balance at the end of 2010-11 to be able to do this much in capital along with the maintenance. The water fund, you see approximately $7.6 million in expenses, and that was recently decreased by about $450,000 based on some estimates from the water department, and trying to husband those monies as well. What we're anticipating is that we would have approximately $3.5 million coming out of reserves in the water fund and about $3 to $4 million in borrowing. We're looking to use IEPA if we can at the 2% or 0% interest rate, which is better than we get on our GO bonds. But that would leave us in the water fund with the target fund balance of about $3 million that we want to keep from year to year. And it's critical that we have that in the water fund as far as any major capital infrastructure failings, especially at the plant itself. We need to have some measure of reserve to take on those, to the repairs immediately in that event. And then that completes the priority 1 projects. I have a summary. You see the priority 2 projects. The list really evolved. It was about twice this size, and we had several where, especially streets and engineering, moved some of their projects up. They sacrificed dollars in the priority 1 area to do it. So in case of, I'm trying to think, Suzette, off the top of my head, we had, was it sidewalk, or what was one of the projects that we moved up and moved streets down a little bit?
The sidewalks actually moved down in traffic operations.
Traffic, so it was, we had traffic calming and another traffic expense that moved up. The staff felt that was a very critical, these were critical projects, and they reduced another priority 1 to keep the total debt service amount limited, to keep that level down. So you have a small amount of projects in priority 2, and then a larger amount, approximately $3 million.
Go ahead. Alderman Jean-Baptiste has a question.
Can you explain what that library chiller is? I don't know what that is.
Right now, the library air handling unit for air conditioning on the top is losing capacity. It's working inefficiently. It has not failed yet, but you know, in the interest of being green, being efficient with our infrastructure, and trying to keep a situation from failure. And Doug, how many chillers are up there? Don't we have several? And so we're not replacing them all for the library chiller. Am I mistaking it?
Right now, there's 3, and each one has some parts, and we're about at 50% capacity.
So in order to avoid a crisis situation, we would prefer to replace before losing our ability to provide heating and cooling in the structure.
Alderman Burris?
The second to last line, Dodge Avenue intersection of what in Dodge?
I'll defer to Suzette, or if Paul is here.
Page, it's the second to last, page 6.
Gotcha.
Second to last under the third.
20.
There. It says 150.
That's the improvement for the Oakland and Dodge intersection.
It's Oakton Dodge, okay.
I'll make that change. So we go to the next page and we hit the summary of, this is it in a nutshell. We're starting the year with just about $7 million. That's our projection. We're looking at $32 million in revenues, $35 million in expenses if we do the $11 million of general obligation debt. This
Alderman, excuse me, Marty, Alderman Jean-Baptiste has a question.
Yes. From approximately a year ago, there was some discussions about building a median down Dodge near the plaza. What's going on with that? Any discussion? I don't see it on the list. Secondly, there has begun a planning process in the industrial areas. So I don't know whether there's any projection of any kind of work that might be anticipated there.
Is that the West Evanston TIF?
Yeah.
I'd go back to that where we were looking at right here in the West Evanston TIF. So we had West Evanston planning, property acquisition, demolition cost, and that's where that money, to my knowledge, is located. But we'd be happy to break those out further and send them back. All of the project details, there'll be maybe a few that have been updated within the last couple of weeks, but the project detail would be at the back of the budget document. So we included that in as a handout, and that's not the summary page. That is one page, one project.
Alderman Burris?
Under the ranking the number one rankings. Just a sort of a quick overview of it. It looks like the majority, probably, let's say 80% of these projects would be considered citywide projects or overall city enhancing projects. But there are maybe 20%, one again, that are really kind of ward-specific projects. And I was wondering if we could also get a detail more on which wards are getting benefit from this first ranking. Once again, just sort of looking at equity here, when we talk about getting rid of the Dodge, Oakton, redoing that as priority or ranking 3, that takes a lot away from the 9th Ward particularly. But just looking through here, I'm not sure that there's anything on this priority 1 that hits the area anywhere near the 9th Ward. Once again, not to be parochial about it, but I'm glad that we're hitting rankings that are overall projects for the whole community, but there seems to be some disparity here.
And this was a first look at the ranking system. We would like to come back to the council and talk about prioritization, and it doesn't have to be just based on the metrics that an engineer or a finance individual cares for. There's a lot to go into a priority ranking. This was just a first look at it, and we would like to come back and talk about it with the council.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Lyons. I think as a corollary to Alderman Burris's question would be what got rankings of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? What didn't make the list? That would be interesting to know.
And if you look at your 5-year plan,
Without having to compare.
That's what I'll go back and look at what got pushed into 11, 12 as a result. Because we started off, we're at 35 million. We were over 50 when we started. So there were $15 million worth of projects that have been moved since September or so.
So there's a way to just sort?
No, we'll have to go back and do a little bit of elbow grease because we didn't just automatically push them out 1 year. Although if you looked at the 5-year plan, it would look like that because there's a big hump in the carpet in 11, 12, a lot of projects there, and in 12, 13. But that's because of the Crown Center is budgeted in. Crown and the Civic Center are still budgeted as major capital expenses in the plan, not necessarily that we're going to go forward with them.
But the information can be compiled.
Yes.
Great, thank you, sir.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, I really appreciate staff doing this work, but to some extent, a lot of the work is our work. And, I mean, when you're handed the priorities on the night you need to vote on them, or that's the night we discuss it, it presents some problems. And I highly recommend and urge the council to insist on workshops throughout the year on the capital plan, because we need to participate in this. It's too late now. And certain things like the Church Street building we can discuss, but that's only because they jump out at us. But a lot of things, I mean, especially like the Oakton Dodge intersection, that's in both our wards. And I mean, I'm trying to think of what does that all mean? I mean, are we going to widen the street? Are we going to change the lighting? So I just think we need more time for the next capital plan, and I would urge us to do workshops. This is every bit as important as the city budget. It's part of it. And in fact, the total amount is probably more than the general fund levy. So,
City Manager?
Madam Mayor, Alderman Rainey, we're perfectly happy to subtract out of the final budget document as much as you would like to this evening.
No, we're not prepared.
And allow you to have as many meetings, special meetings that you'd like to do. Quite honestly, the operating budget was a major undertaking, right. And in talking with you very early on, we had indicated that we would try to get through the operating budget, recognizing that the capital budget is also very important and requires more discussion certainly than one evening. So we never had an expectation that this was a one evening discussion. If you could give us some guidance as to what you'd like to do, if you're comfortable, for example, moving forward with authority for the sewer and water projects, for the grant-funded projects, we're prepared to present to you a resolution that will have those dollars in there, and then we can come back at your next meeting at whatever schedule you'd like to talk about the general obligation funded projects. Because Alderman Rainey, I agree with you 100% that this is just the first foray into it. Obviously, money and availability limits some of this, and so what we've tried to do with this ranking is to give you what we feel are the most important things that you can afford to do. But again, we're prepared to have this process extend out as long as you would like.
You know, City Manager, I think you did us a huge favor for this year, and that is by prioritizing. I think you saved us a lot of time for this year. I'm talking about next year. I'm perfectly satisfied to vote on this capital plan tonight. I think the priorities are pretty similar to mine and probably the rest of the council's. And as they come before us one by one for, you know, construction, going out for RFPs, whatever it is that's going to be required, purchases, we can discuss the minutia then. But for next year, I hope that we do establish a system to look at this.
Absolutely.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste?
Well, I agree with you in general, Alderman Rainey, except I don't agree with the priorities that are being put forth here. The Lakefront Master Plan implementation has jumped way out front, like the fastest horse in the land. We did West Side planning, if you remember. I hardly see any of the proposed projects on the list. So as we have been talking about for the last 8 or 9 years, equitable expenditure of our funds that we all pay for from our tax dollars means doing projects throughout the city. So when the Lakefront Master Plan, I'm thinking that we already approved some expenditures last year to the tune of how much?
Actually, that's what this is. From the last fall when we approved the first phase, this is the 1.1 million from city funds and approximately the same amount from grant funds for the first major phase of the Lakefront Master Plan.
Okay, well, you got to make that clear, because I'm thinking that there's additional funds. But I still think that the discussion of priorities, there are some things that are automatic, you know, street paving, you know, maintaining the, you know, our water mains, et cetera, those things are automatic. But Alderman Burris has a point when she says, to what extent are we being equitable? You may not be thinking about that. And it may be automatic for you to think downtown, to think other places that seems to enhance the city's, you know, appeal or well-being more so than other places. But I think that it's important that we engage in that discussion. For me to approve the priority tonight, you know, it's too spontaneous. I have to have an opportunity to think about that. So I would approve the budget without necessarily approving the priority. And we will need to, in my opinion, those workshops that you talk about, Alderman Rainey, need to happen so that we are able to weigh in and understand better and question the process, and to continue to discuss equity across the board. I don't think it's parochial to talk about those things, because but for the struggle for equity, there would not have been a West Side TIF. Okay? So it's important that we all engage in the discussion and try to pull each other in the directions that make sense in terms of serving the entire city. So I would propose that, you know, that we approve the budget, but not with the ranking as, you know, hard and fast.
Alderman Wilson?
just, I guess, point of further clarification. It's my understanding that the items that have not already been approved, for example, the bike path at the lakefront, that's already been approved, that those items are going to come back before us for approval, correct?
Correct.
So just because they're on the list doesn't mean that they're approved, right, City Manager?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm operating under that premise, that any given one of these things is going to come back to us, and, I'm expecting some of these things won't be approved, and maybe there's some items that aren't on the list that might get approved, so.
The only problem is that the items that are not priority number one will not come along with priority number one. They will take second place. They will take third place, those that are third.
Well, we
So
could
it's
reject
important.
all the number
Well,
ones.
I don't know whether we're going to be able, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that we need to have a sense of the totality as we approve priority.
Right. And I agree with that
Approve
completely.
In general.
Right.
That's
But
what I'm
I just wanted to make 100% sure that we're all clear that this isn't a checkbook, and it's not going to be acted on until we've approved it.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, one of the things that we also wish to do during this year is to reinvigorate. This last year, we did it with the financial reporting, to put those on the agenda, the quarterly financial report, instead of making it just a report, to have it an agenda item. If we need to also include in that financial report a quarterly update on all of the projects and where they're at, sorry for that bad English, but that we do that as well, so you have an idea of, this is what we planned. What did we execute? How did we execute, and what do we have at the end of the year, at the end of the construction season, when we're in August? So I hope that we will be able to accomplish that for you as well.
That would work if you include the projects graded 1, 2, and 3, and not just look at where we are on projects graded first priority.
Definitely.
Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you. One of the questions I have is, for instance, traffic signal upgrades Chicago Avenue. We received, I think, about $1 million in federal CMAQ money for that. So, and we applied for that. I think it was 3 or 4 years running, and finally got that money because of our traffic signals on Chicago Avenue are very antiquated, and they cause backups, frankly. So I think the list is a little bit confusing because 80% of that, the money for that project, is coming from another source. That was an 80-20 match. So.
Well, we actually have both projects. We have them both
Did I miss
from
it?
grant funded.
Okay.
And from our own funds. So I looked at, we had for that project, I believe we were looking at $700,000 or more. $790,000 was the CMAQ funding,
right.
And then approximately $500,000 was the city funding. I'll happily be corrected by Suzette, but let me see if I can get to that. Under the, I don't want to go in the wrong direction, for the grant funded, you see the traffic signal upgrade, Sheridan and Chicago, and that was broken up approximately 600,000 plus was for Chicago, and a smaller amount, I think, was for Sheridan. I hope I don't have that mixed up. Paul Schneider gave that to me just 2 days ago.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm just trying to be clear, because I know that there was a big chunk of that, the Chicago Avenue streetlight upgrade, is from federal funds. And we've been in the process of doing the engineering for at least 2 years. And this, I think, is the implementation year of finally changing all of those streetlights.
And the tough part is that the type gets small really quick when we start to say how much from grant, how much from this, and in what years. And so we tried to get this one down to just some very basics for the current year, but that's what we would go over in our every other month meetings, or however often the council was looking at this, to make sure we had a view of each project's total cost or project by funding source.
Right. Well, I would agree with Alderman Rainey on that, because then I think we aren't hit with a big packet at the end of the year, and we're all kept up to speed on each of these projects as they go along. I mean, I'm very familiar with the Chicago Avenue streetlight project because I've been I've been hoping along with the rest of the staff for 3 or 4 years in a row, and then we're happy when we received that grant. So, but maybe not necessarily everyone else would know that we finally got CMAQ money for that. That was, after we got the CMAQ money for Ridge Avenue lights. So that's the information that would be, we can't absorb it all tonight, but on a quarterly basis, then hearing about how these projects are progressing, when we get the grants in, what the scope of the project is, would be very helpful.
City Manager?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, what I think I'm hearing from the council is a general desire to continue to talk and plan and prioritize as a regular activity. And if the council is comfortable with the orders of magnitude, I think we're primarily concerned with that GO debt number. If the council is generally comfortable with that, what I would propose is that we come back maybe the latter part of March. We actually have a 5th Monday in March, that maybe that would be an appropriate date to come back and talk further about the capital budget. There are certainly some big ticket projects that we would like to move forward with as soon as possible. The roof for this building, improvements at the police department, and unless I'm directed otherwise by the council, we would move forward with earnest on those, and then come back to you hopefully at the latter part of March to continue this discussion, make sure that you have details on all the projects that we have contemplated, priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that is, and allow the council to continue to have that discussion. I just appreciate that we've at least laid some groundwork this evening for discussion, and we can move forward with that. So if the general obligation debt number seems reasonable and you're in general concurrence with those larger projects, perhaps that's sufficient for this evening, and then come back to you at the end of March at a special meeting to continue the discussion.
Does that work?
Second that.
All right. Alderman Grover, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Mr. City Manager. It just feels so much as if we're performing capital improvement triage, which is what it is. Could we add to the information then that comes back to us the status of the project, whether they had been approved already, and how they fit into which criteria? That is, how was it because of the project was already approved that it was ranked with a 1, or because it was part of the multi-year maintenance program? If there's a way to tell us then what was it that put it into different categories, particularly for the general obligation debt-funded projects?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Does that meet with everyone's approval?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Then we would pick this discussion up in a few moments as part of the resolution to approve the budget for 2010-11.
That can.
So what is the number we're talking about? Exactly what is the number?
And Alderman Rainey, members of the council, when we get to item A4, we have a new resolution, which we'll distribute.
And in the resolution,
We'll walk through the numbers by fund.
and just to make it clear, we put in a new section that said, and whereas the capital improvements fund has this much in expenses and this much in general obligation debt. So it's spelled out in the resolution what is anticipated, so we can take a look at those.
Well, don't surprise me. Can you just tell me what the number is?
All right, do you have the number?
Well, we have, from what I just had on the screen right here for the summary, if all of that was included, it would be $11.6 million in general obligation debt. That would be, but that would also fund projects 1, 2, and 3 priorities. That would cover all of them.
7 million?
11,690, is that it?
11,609, yes. And then it drops off to 7.8 for just priority 1 projects, and another 700,000 above the 7.8 for 1 and 2. So we gave varying levels for the council to consider, and I'll stop there.
Levy required, do you have those numbers?
That was in that one, I would just say that's when we looked at that $7.5 million, I would use that same formula. So if I can get back to that.
Alderman
Just-
Wilson? I'm sorry, Marty.
Yes, that's the correct. I apologize.
Alderman Wilson?
Yeah, my inclination is just to limit it to the priority one items.
Then this would be approximately the tax levy that would be created. Just a touch higher, it'd probably be closer to 600,000.
So it's 7.8 million?
Yes. It's 10.1 million in the 2009 levy, and so it will go up to approximately 11 million. You can see it on the right side. We would go to 10,951,000 for the 2010 levy payable in 2011.
So I would move that we limit it to priority one.
Second.
All right, that's a roll call vote. City Clerk? Does anyone want to do, Alderman Burris? Sorry.
I do too.
Restate the
Yeah.
detailed motion.
Well, Alderman Wilson, when you say limit it to priority one, do you actually mean priority one amount?
Amount, yes.
You mean the amount, but not the actual
Correct.
I just want a clarification on that,
The
so we're
funding
not.
amount, correct.
So the priority one amount, but not necessarily the rank of the priority one.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify before we vote.
Right,
on
as I
it.
mentioned, I
Thank you.
expect that some
Yep.
things will, move up and down as far as,
Yep.
if something
But the
breaks, we need
amount
to
is
fix
the
it.
I
key.
just want to make sure to have that on the record.
Okay, thank you.
How you wanted it.
Alderman Rainey?
That's.
That was your
just
concern? All
con-
right.
Hoping that that's.
City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Burris,
Aye.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman John Batiste, Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Holmes,
Aye.
Alderman Tindem, Alderman Grover.
Aye, thank you, Mr. Green.
9-0. The motion passes. All right, that concludes the special order of business. And next we have citizen comment. I only have the non-agenda topic sign-up sheet, and Carol Balcom is signed up. If there is another sheet, or there is someone else who wants to speak on agenda items, please let me know. Carol, go right ahead. There's no other sheet? Did we fail to put one out, or? They were both out, okay.
It was out, but the pen didn't write, so I had to get my own pen. Maybe that was part of it. Carol Balcom, 2811 Harrison Street. I'm a member of the Housing Commission, and I'm here to give you a happy update on behalf of the Commission. This is about the Affordable Housing Plan and about progress toward the plan. So there are three things that I wanted to remind you of that are working right now. Number one, we have housing and foreclosure counseling happening in this building twice a week by Interfaith Housing. So that was part of the Affordable Housing Plan recommendations. Number two, we're engaged in, and this is with staff, we're engaged in expanding and making more flexible the Families in Transition program and other rental subsidy programs. And this was listed as the top priority in the Affordable Housing Plan. And third, the Affordable Housing Plan recommended that an alderman be added to the Housing Commission. And so at the last session, the Housing Commission unanimously voted to recommend adding an alderman to the Housing Commission. Now, we know that that will require the Rules Committee to become involved because it's a change in procedure. So I'm here on behalf of the Housing Commission again to ask for your support for that idea because it's grounded in making the communications between the Commission and the Council more streamlined and more efficient. But it will require your support in order to happen. So the Commission looks forward to working with staff on giving you regular updates on the progress against the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, Madam Mayor, as Chair of the Rules Committee, I'd like to direct staff to put that on our agenda.
That concludes public comment. Alderman Rainey, could we have the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I was wondering if you would prefer to handle the budget first or last?
I would love to finish the budget.
First?
First is good. Does
Here it
anyone?
comes. Madam Mayor, on behalf of the council, I'd like to move approval of Resolution 13R10, which is the approval of the 2010-2011 fiscal year budget, the City of Evanston.
Second.
Thank you. Seeing no lights for discussion, which is, Wally, that was a good thing that I saw no lights, City Manager.
And please, I don't want to stop the momentum, but we do have a new resolution for you, which we'd like to distribute, so we can make sure that you have the final document with the final numbers.
Oh, we trust you, Wally.
I should have asked that 6 months ago. And that when Mr. Lyons gets to the podium, I'll ask him to walk through the numbers.
Alderman Rainey?
Yes. Madam Mayor, at our Saturday meeting, in deference to a concern by managers, there was a 5%, let me finish the previous, there was a 5% cut recommended below the line for salaries of current managers. We since learned what the range of pay was for those folks, and instead at our last meeting, we chose to not impose that cut on them based on issues having to do with pensions, and instead, Alderman Jean-Baptiste introduced a motion to add a furlough day, and we all supported that, and did not cut the 5%. And what I want to know is, did that furlough day cut apply to the entire city staff or just to those managers that were poised to get the 5% cut?
My understanding, Alderman Rainey, is that it applied to all city employees.
Right, here's the problem with that. Since that time, we've heard, at least I've heard, from people I've never heard of before who say they are on the city staff, who indicate that that really wasn't fair with all the people, 50 people being laid off or eliminated, jobs eliminated, that it posed a burden on the little guys when really the proposal from the manager before the council was to cut 5% from those people in that 60,000 to 100+ thousand. And yet our solution to saving them from that cut was to burden even people in low-level salary jobs. And they felt that was very unfair, and I thought that argument made a lot of sense, and I'm concerned about that. And I'm just wondering if we couldn't confine the furlough day to that group of people that you recommended a 5% cut in salary. I don't want to do anything to them really, regardless of the complaints I'm hearing, to reduce their salary in terms of their salary eligibility for pension. But I do think everybody needs to participate here, and I think what we did is very regressive. And so I'm really not talking to you, I'm really talking to the council and asking if anybody else feels that way. If I'm the only one, I'll give it up.
Alderman Nguyen.
Alderman Rainey, I too have also thought about that to some extent. And there is, if we all look at this is just a suggestion that I have, since I don't know that we achieve where we want to go by just having the furlough day apply to managers. Was that what you were asking, Alderman Rainey? Possibility.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because I don't know that you wouldn't get the same amount of money if that was
that's true.
right. But if you look at back to our original document, There was money added for new training funds of $200,000, which for a while confused me because it had a negative sign in front of it.
Oh, I agree.
And I'm wondering if we could use some of those training funds and restore a furlough day, so that, or if that's just something that I'm suggesting, if we want to do that, that's a possibility. I don't know that it necessarily gets us. It leaves the city manager with very little money for training, though. And I initially had been reluctant to touch that because I think, given the reorganization with the staff, training funds are really, really important because a lot of people are going to be doing more jobs and working in a new environment. So I'm offering that for discussion.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste.
I had asked the assistant city manager to please give us the numbers. Number one, how much money did we make up by this furlough day on everyone? And
It's $180,000.
180? And so how many furlough days would we need to take away from the managers in order to achieve 180? And that's a question, right?
We were looking at between 7 and 8.
In addition
Total.
to what's already
The
there.
total.
In addition, so that would make
In
it,
addition?
in addition.
Oh, no.
So it'd be 10.
Okay.
It's
All right.
approximately $23,000 per day for that manager group that we used in the initial analysis.
Okay. Well, maybe the city manager can respond to the issue about training.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste, members of the council, I think if you were to poll our staff and ask them training money that not everyone would benefit from and a furlough day that everyone would benefit from, my guess is that they would all choose to get the furlough day back or the unpaid holiday back. Would ask the council if that's something you wish to do. We can leave the budget number as long as you would let the balance of the $20,000 then be available for other training opportunities, and we could restore that one furlough day.
Okay, fine.
Alderman Burris.
Actually, Wally answered my question.
Alderman Nguyen.
Madam Mayor, then I would move a switch of removal of the 5th furlough day and substitute the appropriate amount from the training money according to the calculations. I believe it's $180,000, and that we leave the $20,000 for the city manager to best use for training possibilities.
Second.
Is this an amendment to the motion to pass the budget? Is that an acceptable amendment? Excellent. All right. It's been moved and seconded to amend the resolution. City Clerk? Could we have a roll call?
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Burris,
No.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste,
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Holmes,
Aye.
Alderman Tindem, Alderman Grover,
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Green.
8 to 1.
8 to 1, the motion passes. Now we need a vote to approve Resolution 13R10 as amended. Alderman Rainey.
I spoke with Marty Lyons today, who was clarifying for me the motion made regarding the branch libraries. I hate to bring this up.
Promise.
But I just found $8,000 to add to the training program. Mr. Lyons said that, yes, we did vote for $168,000, but the actual number is really only $160,100. And so I move that we reduce that amount, the $168,000, by $7,900 and add it to the training budget.
It's been moved and seconded. City Clerk, could we have a roll call?
This is, we jumped to what? We jumped to the library, right?
It's, yes, sorry, City Clerk, it's to take, what was the amount, Alderman Rainey?
60,138.
Yeah, yes, $7,900 to
7,000.
the training budget.
7,900. Alderman Grover?
Just a point of clarification as to where the $7,900, what accounts for the decrease?
It's a miscalculation.
Alderman Nguyen?
Oh, Marty's nodding. Yes, there was a miscalculation.
I also had a conversation with Marty Lyons today, and we compared numbers from the scratch sheets that we had from the budget, and I believe my poor eyesight caused the motion to read 168 rather than 160 plus whatever. Okay, switching from one
You're an
set to the next
honorable
set.
woman.
Rodney, could I have that framed?
You want me to
Quote it and frame it.
In the minutes.
That's not fair.
So, what,
All right. We are amending the budget to add to the training budget the $7,900
but I thought we just said
from the
that
library.
wasn't a misquote, so you don't have the 7,000?
We've got the, don't worry, we have the 7,000. Just call the roll and have confidence. This will work.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Burris.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman John Batiste.
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Alderman Grover.
Aye.
You're welcome.
The motion passes 9-0. Now we're ready to vote on 13R10, a resolution. Well, we were ready. Alderman Burris.
As usual, I'm in the minority here, but I think we're doing a really injustice to the city by voting to approve this budget. I think our revenue projections are way inflated, a little too eager, and I think we haven't done enough substantial cuts, and we, once again, special interests got to a lot of people on this council to vote in ways that probably aren't in the best interest of the city overall. And we said we'd come back in each quarter, to revisit the revenue calculations. Really, aren't we just taking the Band-Aid off really slowly versus just ripping it off? So every few months, we're going to come back and say once again, oh, we need to cut, we need to lay more people off, we need to do this. No, our revenue projections were wrong. You know, I think in business and in the job I do, if you make wrong projections, sometimes your job's on the line. I would like to know if the people that made these revenue projections are willing to stand by them by saying, all right, we don't make the projections, I'll take a 5% pay cut. I'll take a 10%. I'll walk away from my job because I made wrong projections. I don't think we're doing that. I think we're making these projections, and then once again, it's on the backs of the taxpayers. I think it's a real problem. I think it's wrong. We've been doing it for decades. Back in the early 80s, we knew that there was a pension problem. We had tons of data on it. The city council did nothing. We're here now. We have what I think Marty said today, 158 million in debt on the pensions. We need to take a better look at our revenue projections, really what's coming in the door, and we need to take a better look at what we're spending. We all ran on a platform of balancing the budget. We're not doing that. We're doing it with smoke and mirrors.
Alderman Wilson.
I'm not particularly happy with the budget for a variety of reasons. We've let people go. We have a lot of dire problems throughout the city. We have a lot of debt. We have too much debt. But we need to take a proactive, go-forward approach. And I wanted more reserves here. We've all been outvoted on different aspects of this budget, and that's democracy in action. So, some things are what they are. And I don't think it's really fair to say to somebody, will you give up your job if the projections aren't right? Projections are projections. I don't necessarily agree with each projection, but I could be just as wrong as somebody else could be. So it's a budget I can vote for. I'm not happy about it, but I think what we need to be doing on every meeting we have is look at each item, look at everything carefully, and there's maybe one or two items on tonight's agenda still to come, but really think about everything we're spending money on and take a very careful look at everything this year. So, thank you.
Alderman Nguyen.
I'll be brief, Madam Mayor. I've been up here for 12 of these budget cycles. The first one, I have to say, I was in a daze. This one, I think, is, although it's been probably the most difficult personally, and I think it's the hardest one that the staff has ever worked on, we have had the best leadership of all of the 12 years that I've been on the council. I think it's really significant to take note that we closed a $9.5 million budget deficit, and we did not raise taxes. It's also really significant that we have had to lay off close to 40 people and eliminate, I believe, over 50 positions. This is a year like no other that I can remember on the City Council. Never have we had layoffs like this. Never have we had a budget deficit like this. But instead of tearing ourselves apart here as a community, we've had intense battles, but we have achieved, I think, something fairly significant. And I think that it is largely due to the work of Wally and the staff, and I want to thank them for that process. And I know that the next year is going to be a really difficult one, and that we may have to come back and revisit aspects of this budget. We've done that before. I'm hoping the economy will improve, but if we have another significant downdraft, we will have to go back and revisit these issues. I think there are no hard promises here. So I want to thank Wally and the staff and all of the other members of the council for working together on what was a signal event in terms of the budget experience of this city.
Thank you. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the overlay to this entire budget process was an openness and a transparency that I don't think we've seen in many years. The process began back in October, where we opened the discussion up to the entire community. And everything that we've done and everything that's been contributed to the process has become part of our city's budget webpage in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. So I'm hoping this is how we do budgets in the future, that we even improve upon this process, because it's resulted in a budget that in a large way reflects this community's values. I think it's been those values and those priorities have been incorporated into this city's budget. To every employee who will lose his or her job because of our decision tonight, I'm very sorry. To our city employees who continue to do the work of the city, I am grateful to you. And I am grateful to and very impressed by our city staff that have led us through this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to point out that this budget, this is the first time that we've addressed the structural deficit in the budget. And while it is devastating and tragic this evening because many very good long-term employees are losing their jobs that they have done very well over the years, it is way past time that we address the structural deficit. So not only are we not raising property taxes, but we have finally handled the structural deficit. So I agree that the city manager and the staff have done an excellent job, and I thank them very much. Alderman Rainey?
Well, I know everybody is very grateful and very thankful that we've finished the process, but the way we finished it is a very painful way. And I don't think we should be congratulating ourselves or anybody else, because the reason we've come to this point is because we cut valuable employees and we raised fees and charges to our residents. And by doing that, you do end up with a balanced budget. So that's very painful for me. I find the fact that the council voted and changed its vote on the branches, which is just blatantly a duplicated service, blatantly. So that's an expense that we didn't need to include in this budget. And if there were any chance we could revisit this budget, I would be voting no on it. But I'm going to vote yes because I trust those members of this council who voted to include the branches. And I think the branches, including the branches, I know we keep harping on this, or I do, it's symbolic. It's absolutely symbolic of what has happened in our town. We think we're so special. We love our community, but we haven't yet been able to give up some of the things that are not necessities. And we have to do that at some point. And while we are addressing some of the structural issues, that is one thing that we have not addressed. And I think we need to do that. I am going to vote for this budget for one reason only. If I can't get this assurance, I will vote no. And while you may say, well, that's okay because we got 7 votes, it means something to me. But I am taking to heart that there is a promise on this council that taxpayers' money will not be used to fund these libraries after the next 6 months. And if I'm wrong, somebody needs to tell me right now. No? City manager? I mean, anybody here? I got an email from a branch library employee who said that the library, the Evanston Public Library, was working hard on ways to fund the library. And it didn't say private funds. Alderman Jean-Baptiste, is it your assumption that your vote means that the libraries will not be funded with taxpayers' dollars after the next 6 months?
Since you called me out,
Well, you're the person who.
and I got to say something. First of all, my thought to Alderman Burris was that even in the best of times, budgeting is difficult, and we always had Ed Moran who always voted no. So you're not. This is not. You're not blazing new pathways here. But I had to respond to one of my favorite constituents about the vote on the branch libraries. And she had sent me a page from the branch law, branch law, love, is that the name of it? Whatever the name, yeah. And that page, there was a picture of young kids holding a banner, parents, and there was a quote that initially was under the picture that said something like this: democracy doesn't guarantee equality, it only guarantees opportunity. And I think that Evanston now either wrote about it and criticized it, and the person who made that quote withdrew it, or whoever was handling the website. And I had to tell her that, and she had mentioned the fact that the person who issued that quote is the son of a neocon, and is himself a neocon, which politically means that, is the right wing, supported the foray into Iraq and all the rest of those things. And I told her that, and she argues that these people have had the advantages of life. They have the benefits of a branch library, and they're arrogant and this, that, and the other. And I said to her that my fight for equity is not for reducing what others have, but it is to increase it, so that increase what all people have, so that we all have equity. So my call to the branch love people is, as you fight to retain your branch library, it is not about, trying to get an upper hand. It's not about the fact that you had opportunity, you have survived because you're stronger. You have to take up a fight for equity in the whole city. You have to take up a fight to make sure that library services are accessible to all. We do have a central library, and I don't know whether it's the leadership, I don't know whether it's the board, I don't know whether it was the last city manager or the ones before that. That donut hole still exists in terms of services to all of our kids. Maybe we're not promoting and propagating that kind of service enough. Maybe we're not flexible enough to reach out to the entire community. But the issue for me was that I am not for fighting that kind of fight. Children came before us genuinely saying, look, I love this branch library. I love, to be able to go in there. And I know my kids, when they were younger, we used to have some adventures going to the library, the old library. And had I discovered the branch libraries at that time, we probably would be there too. We were at the bookstores, we were at comic book stores. We love books. So we were around that all the time. So my fight is not, I've made, one of the things that, over time people will be able to sum up about me. When I give my word about a direction that I think I need to go in, then that's what I try to stand on. Initially, yes, my position was, in terms of balancing the budget, the issues that we had to think about. We can't fund everything. But when I was convinced by some of these kids that that was important, and I'm also convinced by the branch love people that they're going to fight to achieve independent funding. And I'm going to call them out to also spread that independent funding throughout the city. I am not going to vote to fund branch libraries beyond the 6 months. That's my position. But I am going to continue to be on top of the leadership of the library services in the city of Evanston to make sure that everybody is served. So, Alderman Rainey, you got my word.
I only wish you could have gotten pictures of the employees' children who we've let go. I think that probably would have been really moving, to line them all up here, take their picture. And I have a feeling if we had really been in touch with that reality, that would have superseded saving the branches. So having said that, I believe you this time. I believed you the first time you voted to close the branches, but that was a very impassioned speech that I gave you an opportunity to give. And I believe you. I trust you that when it comes before us again, the branches either will have come up with the money to operate or not.
Alderman Nguyen, it's 5 after 10 in the evening, and we are on the branch library discussion again.
And may this be the last thing. Alderman Rainey, I've said to the branch libraries and to the library supporters that unless there is a funding stream that's not part of the structure that we have right now, I won't support it. But Alderman Rainey, I did want to respond. You had said no tax dollars whatsoever. If there are special service areas, that might be a solution. That I don't know whether it will be a solution, but there might be a solution. So I want to clarify.
People want to vote to tax themselves as long as that isn't supplemented by the tax rolls.
I agree. You have my word.
Alderman Wilson.
I'm not going to talk about fighting for or against anything, but I want to make sure that my point of view is 100% clear, because I've seen things written and comments made. I have an expectation And that expectation is that the library board, Branch Love, whoever wants to get together and come up with a plan. I'm not going to support anything unless it is a sustainable plan that includes service for the entire community. It might include a component of some sort of SSA or whatever it might be, but my expectation is that this has to be a plan that provides service for the entire community. And anything short of that, I'm not going to support. So if somebody comes in and says, okay, we want X dollars for just these two branches, and there's not a plan for a global service, then I'm not on board with that. So that's my expectation.
All right, it has been moved and seconded that we pass Resolution 13R10 approving the 2010-2011 fiscal year budget of the City of Evanston. City Clerk, could we have a roll call?
With the amendment.
As amended.
Alderman Rainey,
Yes.
Alderman Burris,
No.
Alderman Fisk,
Yes.
Alderman John Batiste, Alderman Nguyen,
Yes.
Alderman Wilson,
Yes.
Alderman Holmes,
Yes.
Alderman Tindem,
Yes.
Alderman Grover.
Yes, thank you.
You're
Mr. Reed.
welcome.
Don't forget that.
8-1, the motion passes. Alderman Rainey, could we have the consent agenda?
Won't everybody leave? Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the special budget hearing, February 1, then the minutes of the budget hearing, February 3rd, and then the approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting of February 8. Administration and Public Works requests your approval, council's approval of the payroll through February 14 in the amount of $2,398,422.97. The City of Evanston bills through February 23rd in the amount of $1,477,427.65. Committee requests your approval of the purchase of insurance for property excess liability and excess workers' compensation in the amount of $526,240, with the vendors being Lambert Risk Management Services and Marsh USA. This is a savings over last year, by the way. Next, another savings over last year is a purchase for the renewal of the annual Oracle Iris maintenance and support agreement in the amount of $140,800 to be paid in 4 equal payments of $35,200 from Oracle Corporation in Belmont, California. Next, purchase of office supplies from Office Depot. Is that right? Nope, I'm still missing that. 3.3. I know. I'm just missing it on the page. Sorry about that, Madam Mayor. A3.3 is a contract extension for Groot for recycling collection. This is addition to our current contract through June at the rate of $4.36 per residential unit. Currently, we're paying $4.14. Next is purchase of office supplies from Office Depot. We're going to participate in a U.S. Communities Joint Purchasing Program, and that is an amount not to exceed $100,000 annually. Next, approval of the Sherman Plaza Self-Park Upper Deck Parking Pilot Program. This is for Evanston employees in the downtown, mostly retail and restaurant employees. It's a pilot program encouraging drivers off the street in front of the meters and into the garage.
The top floor.
To the top floor, I beg your pardon. Next, our A5 is Resolution 15R10, which authorizes the city manager to sign a certification statement for an Illinois bicycle grant application for the Ladd Arboretum Bike Path. The maximum amount is $200,000, and it would be for this year.
Can we take that off the consent?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Resolution 16R10 authorizes the city manager to execute a declaration of easements agreement with the Caravelli Montessori School. This was recommended by city staff. Next is Resolution 18R10, which supports the City of Evanston becoming a member of the Pension Fairness for Illinois Communities Coalition. Ordinance 13010 is an introduction, a request for a decrease in the number of Class S liquor licenses for Stained Glass Limited. Also, ordinance, and that has to do with the change in the method of operation there. Next is Ordinance 14010, which increases the number of Class B liquor licenses for the same organization, Stained Glass, because of their change in business operation. Next, Ordinance 15010 authorizes the city manager. This is off the agenda, and it's being held in committee. Alderman Fisk is going to have a neighborhood meeting on this matter. Next, Ordinance 16010 amends Title 8, Chapter 5.5 of the City Code, Municipal Solid Waste Hauling Licenses, revising the Municipal Solid Waste franchise with additions of recycling requirements, which means that multifamily units of over 5 will be required to have a 95-gallon recycling cart provided by the vendor. Madam Mayor, oops, okay. That completes the Administration and Public Works agenda. The first item under Planning and Development is off the agenda and will be addressed by the committee chair.
12.
Pardon me?
812.
A12.
Do you have
Ordinance 11010, amending the sections of the city code relating to refuse and yard waste collection services. This provides for various charges regarding stickers and size of carts, etc. Will go into effect April 1, 2010, and is reflected in the budget that we just passed. Next, Planning and Development. The first item, P1, Citizen Lighthouse, is off the consent agenda and will be addressed by the committee chair. Ordinance P2 is for action, and Ordinance 10010 is to grant a major variation to facilitate the conveyance of land to Caravelli Montessori School at 425 Dempster. Next, P3 is consideration of a proposed plat of subdivision for the Caravelli Montessori School property at 425 Dempster. Then we have Ordinance 9010, which amends Section 618.3 of the zoning ordinance definition, having to do with restoring the original or the previous definition for Type 1 and Type 2 restaurants. This is for action. Then we have Human Services Committee, which is Resolution 10R10, authorizes the city manager to enter into renewals for a variety of resident artist leases for spaces at the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. There are no appointments, Madam Mayor, and therefore I move the consent agenda.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. City Clerk, could we have a roll call vote?
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Burris.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman John Batiste.
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem.
Aye.
Alderman Grover.
Aye.
Welcome.
9-0, the consent agenda passes. Alderman Rainey.
A5 was removed from the consent agenda. That is Resolution 15R10, authorizes the city manager to sign a certification statement for an Illinois bicycle grant application for the Ladd Arboretum Bike Path. Somebody's got to
Thank you, Madam Chair.
wait. I move
Okay.
approval.
Any moves? Move approval, so second.
It's been seconded, moved and seconded. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. This is an item that I think falls into some of the categories we were talking about before. It would be nice to have this project, But in looking at the maximum amount that would be contributed by the state, and I understand from listening to the committee meeting that the state might not even fund this and we might not have to go forward. But if they were to fund it, it would only cover a little less than 30% of the project, and we'd be looking at a cost of up to $500,000. So I don't feel that this is enough of a priority right now to include in this year's allocation.
Alderman Rainey?
Alderman Wilson, are you saying this is not to spend the money, this is to make application? Do you think we should not make the application?
I don't know that we should make the application. And looking at what's required from the city manager by way of the certification, it does require a certification that we have allocated and have available the funds. And I don't feel comfortable making that representation to the state.
But we did last year. Well, I don't know if we did it in 2008. I know they didn't allocate any money, but we made this application last year, and no funding was available. And so, I don't know, just so you know that.
I recognize that, but if the funding miraculously became available, I don't want to be in a position where we're now having to expend those funds. And I understand that it would be a good project if times were different, but similar to this, I'd also suggested that the additional $500,000 for the lakefront path wasn't necessary, but again, I think we have to tighten up a little bit, and this was a place where we could do that.
The only thing I would ask is if staff could tell us if the money was in reserve already. Extra.
Is the money in reserve, Mr. Lyons?
No, the money is not in reserve. I cannot speak to 06, 07, but we did not issue bonds in 09, and so if it was requested and in the CIP last year, it was from previous dollars, and that will be a discussion as far as how reserves are allocated to projects for that fifth Monday, because we have some tightening up to do there as well. And if we borrow $3 million for a specific project, it needs to stay with that project until the project is done. And that way we don't end up with reserves from bonds.
Okay. Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Help me understand, if we are awarded this grant, it still comes before the council to allocate the so-called local matching funds. That is, we can still decline the grant. Even if we accept authorizing the city manager to certify this grant application, we can still decline it if we find, once being awarded it, that we don't have the $500,000 to spend. Am I correct?
Alderman Nguyen?
Well, I would ask the staff then, if we declined a grant,
not a good idea.
What are our chances of ever getting a grant again? These things are sort of cumulative. You can apply and apply several times in a row, and they'll keep encouraging you. But I think if you applied and they spent the effort and you declined it, I think the next time you applied, I don't think that we would. I'd like to hear from the staff about this. But my guess is, because these things are an ongoing relationship with these agencies, that I don't know that would reflect very well on us.
In response to what Alderman Nguyen has indicated, it's true. If we were to decline an award, it would probably look very disfavorable for us in the future. As it was pointed out earlier, this is for the application for this year for funding and the actual construction in next year, in 11-12. So we need to make the application now in order to even be considered for funding for the following year.
Alderman Burris. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Fisk, sorry, then Alderman Burris.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. My apologies.
I was just going to agree with Alderman Wilson. I don't think we don't have the funds this year. We probably won't have the funds next year. And this is not a project that we're going to get an ROI on. We're not going to absolutely need this. It's not curbs and gutters and roadways. So I would agree not to go forward.
This is a path that I walk on, so I'm going to say something about it. I also bicycle on it. It is impossible to walk on when it rains. I understand full well why staff has applied or would like to apply for the grant and has before, but I agree that this is absolutely not an emergency and not something critical that we need to be spending money on at this time. Alderman Holmes and then Alderman Grover.
I just wanted to actually probably say what Alderman Grover was going to say, that he said in P and, oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Fitz.
Sorry.
In P and D, but in terms of the children going to and from school, coming from the Fifth Ward, going to Kingsley or to Haven, that, you know, when it rains, it's really, really bad for walking. And so it's a safety issue for children. And that would be the only reason that I would want to support it.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to pick up on something that Alderman Wilson said, and that is a certification statement. When you sign a certification statement, you're signing a statement that certifies that we will put forth our funds that are part of this. And I don't think that's a wise idea to do right now.
Alderman Grover.
Just to amplify what Alderman Holmes said, thank you, Madam Mayor, that this is not streets and sidewalks and curbs, but it is in many ways a sidewalk for hundreds of students who are walking from south of McCormick to Kingsley and Haven schools. And maybe there's other funding available through Safe Routes to School program for these kind of improvements, but it's an important route. Otherwise, the students are using McCormick who are coming across bridge from Dolores' neighborhood. So it's a critical area to improve. Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, it has been moved and seconded that we pass this. Could we have a roll call vote?
Alderman Rainey?
No.
Alderman Burris?
No.
Alderman Fisk?
No.
Alderman John Batiste? Aye. Alderman Nguyen?
No.
Alderman Wilson?
No. Excuse me, no.
Alderman Holmes?
Aye.
Alderman Tindem? No. Alderman Grover?
Aye. Thank you.
You're welcome. 3 to 6.
3 to 6, the motion fails. Alderman Rainey, does that?
I indicated during my presentation of the consent agenda that the ordinance having to do with Mather easements was being held in committee.
Thank you.
Till our next meeting.
Alderman Nguyen, Planning and Development.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We had such a long discussion, I forgot how we ended it. Mrs. P1, request for Citizens Lighthouse Community Land Trust for an additional $20,000 subsidy. We asked to have much more detailed additional information be brought back to the committee regarding all of the pro forma and other materials that they presented to us. And we had many questions about some of their representations. So we are holding it in committee. So, thank you. That was all, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any report? No report from Human Services.
No report, Madam Mayor.
Excellent. All right, call of the wards. Alderman Rainey.
I'll pass.
Thank you. Alderman Burris. Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a ward meeting coming up on Tuesday, March 2nd from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Evanston Public Library. This is our regularly scheduled quarterly ward meeting. We also have a meeting for affecting residents of 1900 Sherman. The mayor and I and some representatives of the Housing Authority of Cook County are going to be meeting on Wednesday to discuss this and then holding a meeting with the residents of 1900 Sherman to follow up on our discussions from that meeting. And that's my report.
Thank you. Alderman Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Couple things. Just want to inform the council that some planning is going on in the Second Ward, going south of Greenwood. If you recall, the west side planning that we did went all the way south to Greenwood and stopped there. We resumed that process, and this time we have not hired a consultant. Our staff is engaged in that process. They began the process with a meeting meetings with the industries within the Hartree, Maine to coming north to Dempster, from Dodge to McDaniel, and they've begun a swap analysis. So we're going to do it. We're going to save money. Okay, Alderman Rainey. So the other thing, a last word on the library. When we talk about what we've done, this was a compromised agreement. The initial proposal was to fund for the entire year. We negotiated down to 6 months, so it's important to note that there was some progress in the process. Lastly, let me just give you guys a brief update on my trip to Haiti. I was there from the 6th to the 12th. Getting there on the 4th week after the earthquake was qualitatively different than folks who were there during the first week. First week, bodies were in the street. People were panicking all over the place. Those who were injured were walking around with crushed limbs, seeking assistance. When I got there, I found, that traffic had resumed, communication had resumed initially. 2 out of 3 towers that served the country were down. The banks were reopened. The markets, food markets were functioning. Gas stations were functioning. The crisis is, and it's not going to go away, is that you have more than 1 million individuals under tents or without shelter. Some have great tents provided by a number of different entities. Some have makeshift tents that they have made up with tree, branches and cloth. Sometimes they may have the luxury of having a piece of plastic to throw over those tents. Others are sleeping in open air. And some whose homes have not yet, were not immediately impacted, are fearful of going back inside. In fact, today I understand that there was an aftershock of 4 points. So people cannot even trust the grounds that they're walking on. As I said before, the devastation is massive, but it's not pervasive. It's not all over the place. All of the landmarks in the capital of Haiti, they're gone. The National Palace, have you seen pictures? The Parliament, courthouses, many universities are down. Some hospitals are impacted. The main cathedral and a lot of churches fell down. We met with a lot of people, the UN, USAID, Haitian government officials, various commissions that were empowered to manage food distribution, healthcare delivery, shelter. We met with opposition political parties, civil society folks, and we went in some of the camps. We went through a camp with 70,000 people, just imagine, okay, that extended forever. And, people were struggling because the sanitation issue is not resolvable under those conditions. And I went to a camp in somebody's yard where they had 200 children who had lost their parents as small as babies who were there. So the thing that is striking, on the one hand, while there's so much devastation, the reality is people are up and about and moving forward. There's a lot of concerns as to whether or not the shelter issue will be resolved by the rainy season, which is supposed to start in March. And hurricane season will start in July. The UN didn't have an expectation of being able to resolve it. The NGOs, the Haitian government, the USAID. So that's a crisis that is really going to exacerbate. While I was there, it drizzled 2 nights, and the next day people were in the street protesting. So I suppose that when the rainy season really starts, people will, be in the street and will demand some resolution that there may not be resolution for at this time. Although a lot of organizations are moving, they're ordering tents all over the place, their conclusion is that not enough tents have been made to meet the needs. So there's a lot to be done. I went through the General Hospital, which is like a Cook County, but it serves that kind of population, indigent population. But the reality is, it's operating on a $5 million budget, and as compared to, I think Cook County is in the billions. So the paradigm is different. The needs are greater. Children with amputated, limbs, old people. It was, difficult. Nevertheless, I didn't see people sitting back. Everybody was in motion to try to find resolution. Of course, the opposition parties are saying we could do it better. And civil society has a lot of criticism because they're concerned about issue of sovereignty. They're concerned about the fact that there have been a lot of criticism that some of the entities who wanted to come in to bring service and goods did not have access to the airport. They had to go through the Dominican Republic. There's a lot of explanation as to why that is, because when the U.S. government stepped in to restore the tower to do air traffic control, there was such massive, demand for landing space to come in to bring assistance that they had to divert a lot of people to the Dominican Republic. So the Haitian people were the first responders. They were there helping each other. Dominican Republic people came in, U.S. came in, and people were grateful for that. The reality is there's a lot of work to do. A lot of partnership needs to go on. The Minister of Education reported that they've lost 400 teachers who have died, and about 3,500 students. So there are massive needs. A lot of the buildings have fallen, and we will be, those of us who are in the community who are thinking about this issue, will try to see if we could think through how we might be able to be useful as a city and come back to the city and try to make some proposals to see how we can participate in pushing forward. Thanks.
Thank you, and welcome back. Alderman Nguyen.
2 brief things, Madam Mayor. First, thank you all for your support for the moving forward with necessary steps for the purchase of the 425 Dempster by the Carvalho Montessori School. I think that's a very good decision for the city, and it will prove to be very positive in the future. Second, I'm a member of the City School Liaison Committee, and at the meeting we had just a week or so ago, we discussed the safe routes to school issue, and I think that we should bring up this path issue immediately with the 2 school districts, because all of the safe routes to school grant funding goes to infrastructure issues. If you look at their website, it's all sidewalks, routes, curbs, traffic issues. So I think that we should
But we need the school districts to participate in that with us. So I think that we need to make that reference. The next meeting is in May, but I think we should contact them immediately. We don't need to wait till May. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
Just wanted to mention Wednesday, February 24th, at the Robert Crown Center, 6 p.m., there's going to be a reception honoring Angel Giordano and Christopher Davis, who were the 2010 United States Junior Ice Dance Champions. And Manol Atanasov, and forgive me if I've mispronounced that last name, I just know you as Manol. But Manol is the 2010 Bulgarian National Junior Men's Champion. And again, that'll be this Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the Crown Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Holmes?
No report.
Thank you. Alderman Tandem?
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank Alderman Jean-Baptiste for his, the one comment in particular he said about our purpose here is to raise up all of Evanston, and I think that is the spirit of this council, the spirit of our community, and I think that this is, I agree, been a very, very difficult task, but hopefully we can continue to raise spirits and get through this. I'd also like to congratulate the Mitchell Museum of the American Indian on a very successful fundraiser yesterday. I think if you don't know the Mitchell Museum, it's one of our city's gems. It's a partially privately owned museum centered in the 6th Ward on Central Street. It has interesting things for all ages, and I think this is, once again, a community stepping up and supporting an organization that they value in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank Alderman Jean-Baptiste for all his words tonight, but especially for taking his good works to Haiti and for giving us a report. Thank you, sir.
Alderman Wilson.
I have a motion pursuant to the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120 permits exceptions to the requirement that meetings of public bodies be open to the public. A public body may hold a closed meeting, also referred to as an executive session, to consider certain subjects. I'm reading the wrong motion. Here's my motion. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, litigation, and minutes. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2, subsection C, 1, C11, and C21.
Been moved and seconded. City Clerk, could we have a roll call vote?
Alderman Rainey. Alderman Burris. Aye. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Jean-Baptiste. Aye. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tindem. Aye. Alderman Grover. Aye. You're welcome.
9-0, the motion passes. Thank you, Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, you can come after
I know,
lunch.
I lead a